right, we are rolling. Let me see if, make sure they can hear us, and we will be getting started. All right, let's see if, are we live? It's gonna be a bit of All right, we are live. Give everybody just a minute to see who's going to join, and then we will get started. Okay. Because the chat's going to be on that other side. All right, ready? Hello, everybody, and welcome back to VU DiVulged for our second live show. Today we have Allie Crouch, who is a legal studies student. Today she's going to be talking to us about her experience in the Homeland Security program, her experience in the legal studies program, and as well as the 2-2 program. Allie, if you want to go ahead and just give a quick introduction of yourself, where you're from, who you are, what you plan on doing.
Yeah, so I'm from Terre Haute, Indiana, and I actually came here in 2019 when I graduated from high school, got my 2-year degree in graphic design, and graduated with that. I went to IU for a year, but it didn't work out. And I decided I wanted to go with something a little bit more concrete, that I knew that there was opportunities and different options within, something that I knew I wouldn't have to do freelance work, that I would just have like a steady income. And so that's why I chose legal studies, because I really had this passion at the time to like go to law school. I still do. So I had the full intention of coming back here for the legal studies program. And then I was presented with the 2+2 opportunity, but I do want to talk about like the legal studies program and everything within that, all the opportunities and that it presents, because I don't think a lot of people really understand like what it's about. They think you just study the law, which you do, but like there's more to it than that. It's not just about the opportunities within the legal studies program that presents us with jobs in the legal field, such as being court reporters or paralegals, because those are both things that you can come straight out of the legal studies program and be certified to do, which is really good, but it also prepares us for law school. And another thing is we also have like really small class sizes with a real attorney, and so she's really good at preparing us for law school, and a lot of our previous alumni have made it into really good law schools with either really good scholarships or free rides. And so I think it's a benefit that our program is more catered to actual legal studies than some of the other programs that you see in Indiana. Because I studied political science at IU, and I was not really a fan because I was just learning more about historically important things, whereas now I'm like really learning the principles and like common law and everything that you would need to know that would help you prepare for law school. And it helps us prepare for the LSATs as well, which is basically just the admissions test you have to take to get into law school. And it's more of a logic-based test than it is about the law or anything. But it's still really helpful. And we even have like clubs and a lot of different outside things that are designated to help us prepare for those things. Like we'll have real experienced field trips that give us experience within seeing how the legal field works, because we don't always have a grasp of it. It's not something you see in everyday life, and it gives us a grasp of like where we're going to be working, whether it is as an attorney or whether we decide to be paralegals or even court reporters, anything in the legal field. I think it gives us a really good grasp of it. And there is like a growing capacity for having attorneys, not just attorneys, but all jobs within the legal field. There's a huge demand for it right now, and I think this school is one of the best for it, because not only is it cheaper, I think the education's great. There's nowhere I would rather be studying than here. And I think a lot of people agree with that, just because we get that like full experience. We're not stuck in lectures with 200 people. We get to ask questions and be engaged in the program. But like I said, I didn't even know about the 2+2 program before I got here, and then I was told about that because the only thing you really need to get into law school is a bachelor's degree. And so when I found out that I could do that here for inherently less time because I had all of my core classes that I already needed required, when I found out I could do that, it sounded like the best option because I didn't have to transfer anywhere. It was cheaper. And not only that, but it's all connected. Like everything in the Homeland program is definitely interconnected with the legal studies program. Because I could have a degree in anything, but I do think the 2 degrees I'll achieve in legal studies and in Homeland are like the best degrees that I could possibly have. Not to mention by graduating from the Homeland program and having a bachelor's degree that already presents another world of opportunities and options for me to explore. I mean, one of those being like joining the FBI. So a lot of people will try to apply for the FBI and you have to have like 2 years of experience, I think it is, but you can apply for the FBI right out of law school. That's what a lot of people do, and that's how a lot of people get in. So that's already like another option that I didn't even know was available before I came here. And so I think it's really good just to get that out there and to let people know that there are so many options besides just coming here and becoming a paralegal, or coming here and entering the Homeland program and then becoming, an officer. I just think that's like the most important aspect is getting out the different options with it, and that's why I'm glad that I'm here.
I remember when you said that you're able to add on. That's what a lot of people, you hear that from a lot of students here. It's they came in here for, I personally came in for law enforcement, but there's conservation, fire science. We touched upon this a little bit in our last episode as well. Legal studies. Everybody comes in here for those 2-year degrees. Then they're told about the 2-for-2 program. It's, hey, you don't have to start all over. It's not like you have to take 3 years because we'll count some. It's you can take your 2-year associate's degree and then immediately jump into your bachelor's degree in Homeland 2 years into it. And I think that really helps students because they during their time in their 2 years of legal studies or law enforcement, etc., they can really decide what we want to do, and if we even want to progress the bachelor's degree. I know one student, he's taking the bachelor's degree because he came here for 2 years, and he's like, well, my college is being paid for through some scholarship. I'm not 21 yet, so I might as well go for the whole thing.
I think another thing is when we all come together, because a lot of us come from associate's degrees from all these various programs, but when we all come together and talk about these things, then I know of way more options than I thought were possible. Like, there are a lot of students that might not have known that you could get to law school with just a bachelor's degree. Not to mention the opportunities a bachelor's degree opens up to begin with. I mean, an associate's degree is good, but like a bachelor's degree is great. There's just so many options, and I think we're able to utilize that a little bit more when we know of the different opportunities.
I think that's also a good thing to touch on too, is that you have all these people coming from these different backgrounds and these different ideas that are all meshing together in something as important as Homeland, and that just in and of itself becomes a melting pot of ideas and opportunities where you get to learn about other points of view and things like that. Yeah,
especially when there are also some kids who just go 4 years Homeland, right? So you have the people who spend their whole time doing it, and then you have the miscellaneous 2-for-2 people, and I'm pretty sure we've all been somewhere in a class where they ask us a question and we all look to the conservation kid because it's like, that's all you about, or a fire science, like what, or hazardous materials. Like I'm in a hazardous material class, a lot of fire science kids in there. So every time there's like a hazmat, or we talk about the fire department, we all look to the fire science kids and we're like, what do you guys think we should do?
Yeah, everybody gets their time to shine. It's like, and because if you spend 2 or even 4 years in the same program around the same people with the same goals, you are not getting a wide perspective of everything that's out there, all the different, and how everything does interconnect. If I become an attorney, I'll have to work with, all different kinds of people and all different kinds of careers, and I imagine it goes the same for most of the careers that will come out of the Homeland program. And so I think it's good to just have a scope of everything that's going on instead of just what you want to do. Not to mention, like, that opens up the opportunities for yourself that you never even considered.
Also with the 2 for 2, there's constantly a flow of new people. Every semester, there's at least a handful of new students as they've completed their previous degree. Now they're coming into us. And some of them, you even know them before they get into the Homeland side of things, because a lot of the Homeland and law enforcement classes, they're all in the same building. So you see them there, right? You get their perspective when they're just in their little sector, but then you kind of see how people change once we bring it into the Homeland and they get taught this broader environment.
Yeah, another thing is we have way more, from what I've experienced, what I've seen, non-traditional students at this school than I've seen at a lot of schools. When I went to IU, there were non-traditional students, but like not in the same like scope that it is here. Like, you have a lot of students that are either working full-time or maybe have families, or like me that took a year off school and decided to come back, which isn't something you see every day. And so I think this school in general has already opened up those opportunities and people wanting to better their lives or start new careers, and I think that's really like motivational. I felt the most comfortable coming back here to study of all the places I could have gone because of how inclusive it is, not just like in every single program, because the professors here we have a special bond with. We get to connect with these professors one-on-one, learn from them directly. It almost feels like an apprenticeship, working with our professors rather than just sitting in these huge lectures for hours and feeling like you're learning, but you're not really retaining anything, because I felt that way. I'm sure a lot of people have felt that way.
The one thing I like that you brought up was, the classes, like for me personally, I prefer a conversation to learn. I hate reading a textbook or just sitting there listening to a PowerPoint. Sometimes I'll even like talk to my fellow students about a topic we literally just talked about in class, but I know I'll remember the conversation much better than just the lecture. So
Well, I mean, like, a lot of my classes are lecture-based, and I'm okay with that because I know at the end of the day, if I have a question for my professor or I need to reach out to another student, it's so easy because it's not awkward, it's not weird. I don't have to reach out to an assistant professor in order to ask my instructor an important question. It's all, like, right there. Or even in class, if I have to ask my professor a question because I don't understand something, I always can, and that is something that I think a lot of people take for granted, is getting to have that kind of experience.
Really a benefit of the smaller classes. I think the biggest class I've had here was 30 people.
Right.
It's not like some schools where they
My
have
biggest is
100,
15.
150. I had one class I have right now has 8 people in it.
I mean, I went from having, when I graduated from the graphic design program here, I went from having 6 people in my graduating class. And I remember walking into my first class at IU and having 200 people sitting and like watching this PowerPoint. And some of it, a lot of the lecture-based material didn't feel like it was coming from the professor. It felt like it was coming from a book. It didn't feel engaged in a lot of it. And I do here I've studied this. I'm studying 2 majors right now, and I feel engaged in both of those programs. And I felt engaged when I was in the graphic design program. I feel like all the classes here, the professors make sure the students are learning.
That is one of my favorite things about this school. When I came in the first time, this was how it was described to me, is that at least I could speak for the Homeland and the Legal Studies program and the surrounding programs in the building. I can't really speak for graphic design, but we're learning from practitioners. We're learning from people who have done it.
Right.
Not people who went and got their master's degree and then just went to teach. We're learning from people. We're learning from former attorneys, former FBI agents. We're learning from people who have done the job for long enough to teach it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like you said that. It's not one of those they did the job for 3 years and they came. A lot of them, they did the job for.
Or still doing the job.
Or still doing it, but at a bare minimum for 10 years before they came here. Professor Caprino himself, he was an FBI agent for 29 years.
Yeah.
Before he taught here. So, like you said, having that, the person that's actually done it, they know what they're talking about, they've experienced themselves what they're talking about, it really helps. And since to me, it personally helps the conversation flow better because they're not really caught off guard with questions you ask.
Right.
Because it's not one of those, they read their professor notes or whatever, their own the textbook they issue, whatever it is they read, and then try to teach you about it, but they're just repeating the words.
Or like if you've ever taken a class with an assistant instructor, they have minimal experience, and so I'm really glad I don't have to experience that here. And not to mention, with having smaller class sizes and our professors are more engaged in the outside of the curriculum. They're able to engage in our clubs a lot more. I mean, you see Professor Hudson and Professor Caprino helping us to actually utilize a lot of experiences such as field trips or other educational opportunities that you're not going to see at other places. Like we've had the opportunity to go to the appellate court in Indianapolis as the Legal Studies Club, which is not something that every program at every school is able to do because they don't always have those kinds of resources to
We
help
get job postings via email.
Yeah.
Like we get to see the opportunities that are really close to us as well as internships from farther away.
Yeah.
Our professors are constantly emailing us, which one thing, that's an advantage of Vincennes. Yes, it's a small town, but because they know that the vast majority of the students who stick around longer are the Homeland students, there's a lot of internship opportunities in the Homeland program here in Vincennes, and we're constantly, I think maybe at least 2 a week of, hey, there's this internship, should anybody be interested in it?
Yeah, internships are really, and also guest speakers. We got to meet not only the 3 justices from the appellate court when we went on that field trip, but we got to meet another justice the next week from the Supreme Court in Indy. And so, not only do we have, excellent guest speakers, because every school you see is going to have guest speakers, but specifically with the Homeland and the Legal Studies program, we are able to meet people who are in positions that we eventually want to be in. These people we're able to cater our careers and our lives more around things we actually want to do by getting to see people do things that we want to do. I mean, it's inspirational, I think.
Because it's one thing, online to hear, well, here's the normal path, right? But, online, it's always going to be the standard requirements. But by meeting these people, you can go, well, what did you do that, set you out from the rest? Or basically, guaranteed you your spot? Or what was something you did that, put you in the limelight and was more favorable? And where do you see that, these professionals, if they've worked in the area for 20 years, where do you see people commonly make mistakes, and what are things that I should avoid doing?
Right.
All right. Well, thank you, Blake.
Thank you.
Thanks, Blake.
Before I fall over all the boards back here.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Blake has got to go, but we will now bring in Aja to continue the interview.
What's up?
So, Aja, you've been listening the whole time, so is there any comments or questions or concerns that we haven't brought up yet? Or have I pretty much asked everything you were going to ask already?
Well, it's one of the things, I don't know enough about legal studies in general to ask good questions other than how are those classes and what do y'all think simple questions like that don't really have enough a lot of meat to them or substance.
Well, for me, before I entered the legal studies program, I didn't need to know about what I was learning. I did not care. I was more in tune with what was going to happen afterwards. I came with the mindset that whatever I have to get done, I will get done, which is why I entered into the Homeland program as well. I didn't even know what the Homeland program was before I entered, and it turns out I love it. But regardless, I didn't join anything necessarily for fun, even though I do have fun. I did it because I knew the opportunities it would present. I knew that I wanted to get to law school, and I think it doesn't just present opportunities with law school, it presents
And you
so
saying
many.
that also really just points out, how different it is. So when we say, there's different 2-for-2s, right?
Yeah.
There's the legal studies, law, fire science, conservation. They're not similar programs,
Right.
right? It's not like, you took a law enforcement and then I know half the legal studies program. All right, they are fundamentally different to where quite frankly, I didn't even know we had a legal studies program. I didn't even know that was part of the 2 for 2 until we talked to you.
I think it's one of the best parts of the 2 for 2, but I'm biased, so I mean, but here's the thing though, even if I didn't do the legal studies program and I just went to Homeland for 4 years, or I did conservation law and Homeland for 2 years, I could still get into law school with a bachelor's degree. I just chose to do legal studies because I knew that would help prepare me better for law school. So that's another like amazing thing. You don't have to study legal studies.
Well, in a way, if you don't really know what you want to do, just take the 4-year Homeland, get the broad spectrum of what all it is. Or if you have a relative idea, like I wanted to go into law enforcement because I want to go into crimes against children, I did the law enforcement degree. Then I came here and I did the Homeland degree, and I'm taking a few extra classes as well, so I can get the Homeland Cybersecurity Incident Responder degree as well.
Yeah.
Well, all of which, it's, the Homeland, we can go on and on about it, but it's just so broad.
Yeah.
There's Homeland Security is everything relating to the health and safety of the homeland, from terrorists to the food we eat. All of it is Homeland Security.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so is legal studies, and I know you guys don't have like as much of a grasp of like what all the options are within that, but like I said, you can come out of that program without a bachelor's degree, just getting certified to become a paralegal, which is already a good job in itself. Not to mention, a lot of students who go to law school eventually do work as a paralegal before they get into law school or while they're in law school, because it gives them that experience. And oftentimes, a lot of these law firms will offer them jobs immediately after they graduate from law school because they already have that experience. I mean, we have a few students in our program that don't have any intention of going to law school, that are just doing their 2 years to become paralegals or legal assistants, and that is also like a wonderful opportunity.
So speaking of jobs and roles, in the Homeland Security, you have to do an internship. Have you done your internship yet, or are you in your internship?
I have not done my Homeland internship yet. I'm doing work study right now, so there's some, I'll have to wait probably to do my internship, and I imagine I will probably try to do an internship legal related because I think that'll really boost me up.
All right. Do you have any ideas what you want to do? Do you have any ideas of any?
Well, I could probably try to become a paralegal after I get my associates in legal studies, and that's not just a really good paying job, but it sets me up for like where I want to be. So that's probably what I'll do. But there's like it's hard for me to tell you that right now because there's so many options that how am I supposed to decide yet?
I know one person. I don't know what they do, but they work at the courthouse.
Yeah. Well, there are court reporters too, but paralegals essentially just help attorneys with a lot of paperwork they need done. Like they will write motions to continue or.
Well, also it gives you someone who's in that field to vouch for you, right?
Yeah.
They know you. They know your work ethic.
Oh, yeah.
They can tell, your strengths, your weaknesses, and help you improve, and possibly point you in the, hey, I think this is the path for you to go down. Not
just point you in that direction, but like a lot of these law firms, as soon as you pass the bar exam, they'll offer you a job. Because, well, not only are a lot of attorneys desperate for paralegals to help them with that kind of work, but they're also desperate for attorneys. And so when they bring you in and take you under their wing, and although, like, we know how to do a lot of this work, we're essentially learning how to do it their way, learning how to do the things that they need done. So for them to offer us that option, once we pass the bar exam to become attorneys at that firm, then that's a win-win situation, I think. You're basically already given a job before you're even ready for it.
And with the distinguished speakers and everything we bring in, so not only do you do your internship with them, but you've also heard other professionals in their field with their perspective, so then you can ask your internship individual, what do you think about this? What do you think of this? Because, sometimes ideas conflict, and then you learn that it's not black and white. There's that little gray area you have to work in.
Yeah.
And you're able to kind of develop your own style of how you do things.
Yeah.
Right? Because you go, I liked this idea and I liked this idea, but I didn't really like how that third person did it. Which it's fine, if it works for them, it works, but it's not your style or what you want to get into. So.
Well, yeah, and I mean there are different types of law that you can't specialize in a certain type of law. Once you go to law school, everyone studies the same thing. Everybody comes out with the same material essentially, but you can choose what you mainly choose to do once you pass the bar exam and you work at a firm. I don't in particular want to do family law just because it's sad. But I am interested in criminal law, and like a lot of the programs that we have and the classes that I'll have to take here already prepare me to know part of what is expected, and then when I get to law school I'll have to take another criminal law class, and so I'll be prepared for that. So when I do start working, I can work as any kind of attorney, but that doesn't mean that I have to practice every single type if I don't want to. I don't want to work big law either. I don't feel like working in a huge law firm where I am busy all the time. It might be good money, but it's just not my cup of tea. But it is someone else's cup of tea. There are plenty of people who would love to do that and just work and make lots of money. I'm just not one of them, and so I'm glad that there are different options. I don't necessarily have to do that.
And with, being in the Homeland degree, as we've stated earlier, what is such broad, because everybody with different backgrounds comes in. That must help you with your legal studies because, a lot of times when people get, what's the word I'm looking for, book smart, right? They're very book smart. They're like, well, this is the law, this is the law. But then you meet the other side, law enforcement in the field or conservation, and they go, well, what about this scenario? Then how would the law apply? Right. So you're not only are you getting their perspective, but it makes you think, well, yes, this is the law, but a lot of the law is discretion, right? So, but it's like in this situation, how would that law apply? Or you're like, well, I think this needs to be a law, but then somebody goes, but that's not how the situation works. I won't get into it, but a lot of people like try to Monday night quarterback police officers' actions, and lawyers do it all the time. Which is, that's how the court system works, whatever. But when you talk to these law enforcement students, they're like, well, this is the law. But you're like, yes, but this was how the scenario played out from my perspective. Because, I'm pretty sure you've heard, legal studies tell you, you can't look at a case with hindsight. You have to look at it from someone, like what the person knew in the moment. Like if an officer, for example, heard officer in need of assistance over the radio, and 20 of them rush over there for one person, you can't get mad at the 20 officers for excessive force. Why did it need 20 guys? Well, they only heard officer needs help. They didn't hear if anybody else was going, so they went.
Right. Well, and like how you use the word discretion, I think a more accurate, so like for our job as attorneys, or when I become an attorney, more like, it's not necessarily discretion of the law, but it is finding common law or precedent that has already been used and directing that, using that to help our clients or help whoever needs help in certain situations. So it's less about how I interpret it, it's more about how the law previously has interpreted it and how that's going to apply in certain cases. So,
but with an ever-changing environment, that's very hard to do. Laws are constantly being
changing,
added, reworded,
yeah,
and sometimes completely thrown out.
Yeah, well, and that's where like the academic point of view is. You have to be updated. You have to do a lot of research on these things. You have to know what you're talking about before you make certain decisions, because our whole work when I become an attorney is to find what is supposed to be the right way, what is supposed to be just, what is the most accurate, and what applies the most to certain cases. And,
sometimes they even have you say, other than this charge, what is something else you can get, because sometimes that will be what you have to do. They got Al Capone by tax evasion.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's another thing, too. I mean, you never, it's not always black and white, like you said.
He ran a mafia, his men, killed dozens, if not hundreds of people, bootlegged all sorts of illegal alcohol, but they got him for tax evasion.
Yeah, well, and I mean, there's so many things, not just in the legal field, but within law enforcement and everything that has to do with anything law-related, that there are certain things you can't do, and so you might have to find not just necessarily like ways to get around it, but not everything is just a straightforward path, and that's why like having a thorough education in like legal studies or law enforcement and like really understanding how to navigate things helps with outcomes of certain situations.
I remember. Oh, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I actually do kind of got a question, and this is also for like any viewers that are also kind of curious. Legal studies in general, like what are some classes if they were to come here to VU and take legal studies? What are some classes they could expect? Like, give a brief description of some class or some class that you are more interested in or you know more about that you've currently taken or taken in the past.
That's a good question.
Just so they know, like.
When I first came in, I had to take intro into legal studies, which is ethics, which was really interesting because it gave us a really broad scope of a lot of common law, a lot of precedent, a really wide scope of all the things we'd be studying in legal studies. I also had to take a tort law class, which was really interesting, but my favorite was our legal research and writing. So in that class, it was a little bit less lecture-based and more about writing depositions or motions to continue, things like that, that would eventually be things that we would have to write either as paralegals or attorneys. And so we've already gained that experience. I really liked it just because I like writing and a lot. I'm good at it. It was easy for me to pick up on. But I'm totally biased because I like all of my legal studies classes. I mean, are they extensive? Yes, but like they kind of come a lot easier to me than they might come for other students. I feel like I just learn a lot. There are sometimes when you take a class where you don't feel like you're picking up anything, but I think I'm just so interested in it that it's easier for me that I like want to do it.
And kind of to build off that question, another question we had from our viewers last week. So obviously going to legal studies, there's probably a lot of, homework, right? Because, you got to study the law and all this stuff. But what is the standard workload, in your opinion, for a student? Because, you're going to have to do your classes, right? At one point, you're going to need to do an internship, and a lot of students have intern jobs. But they also still want time for, clubs and, well, quite frankly, to go goof off in the yard. So
yeah.
What would you say, in your opinion, is the workload for a standard student in the legal studies program?
So our homework is not that bad. That's not to say that it doesn't sometimes get, if you procrastinate and you put it off, then you're going to have a hard time. You should definitely delegate the time to actually sit down and do it, to know what you're doing, and to make sure you're doing it right. But frankly, like a lot of our time is mainly spent studying for tests because all of our tests, they're not multiple choice. They are short answer questions that you have to know essentially every part to it. You have to know every single, like if there's a vocab word, you better know it. And so I'd say homework isn't as much of a struggle for me as it is like making sure I know every piece of content for those tests. We also don't take finals or anything because we have enough. Also like the law is always changing, so that's one part of it. But we cover enough material to where and we study it hard enough, and with our tests are so thorough that it's not really like we need to have a final or a midterm to go back through all of that stuff because we're expected to know all of this stuff for our future classes. Like if you don't know burden of proof, then you're in a pretty tight spot if you're like in your second semester. And so a lot of these things are just, you have to build off of it.
And my personal experience, one thing I liked about it is we all see the memes on the internet about high school where it's what they tell us to study versus the test. Here it's if you paid attention in class, right? You'll know 60 to 70% of the answers just by paying attention in class.
Right, but also study your book because there's a lot of times where you might cover something briefly in class, but if you didn't read about it, you don't fully understand it. You can't touch on everything.
Or a little bonus information.
An hour and 15 minutes.
I remember one of our professors, he constantly, in the finals and tests and everything, he puts a few current event bonus questions in there for extra credit because it's, if you're a Homeland student, you need to be knowing, or legal studies, you need to know what's going on in the country and in the world because that affects everything relating to Homeland.
I feel like it affects everyone in general.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like everybody should be updated on that kind of stuff and just at least have a scope of what's going on.
Not like an in-depth, but just a general,
just a general
awareness
idea.
of, hey, this is going on, you know.
Yeah, because it affects inherently. It might not seem like it affects you, but there are things out there that definitely affect everyone. And even if it doesn't affect you, you should still care.
And you'll often sometimes find explanations as to why our military is on the other side of the world. When you connect all the links, you're like, that actually makes sense. But that's a conversation for
Well,
another
I mean, but that can go into the whole conversation of people who like to complain about things that are happening in this country, or people who don't vote, when it's like you are not keeping up with what's even going on. Like, how do you have the audacity to complain?
That's one thing I like about our classes here is that, you know, they are very flexible, and we, like you said, we take field trips related to our field. You know, for example, in my crisis disaster class, a tornado went and hit Sullivan and destroyed 2-3 block area, and I was in the crisis class, and we were like, this is exactly what we've been talking about, right? We've been talking about natural disasters, and it was very short notice, but we got a field trip together, and we went to help, you know, pick up and help around, and with your legal stuff, that's one thing I really like about this program is it's not just a random field trip for fun at times.
Right.
It is actually related to what you want to do, or it's, you know, you can actually put it in practice. We actually, for example, when we went to Sullivan after the tornado, we saw the markings that they put on the houses that, you know, says how many people they found, is it clear, what's the, you know, how stable is it, right? Because we understood the symbols. We even saw, you know, like, okay, that house is safe enough for us to go into. And then we would look at one house with a different symbol, and we would go, that house is about to collapse at any moment.
Well, and it's interesting to see not only how the material that you're learning in your classes relates to, like, real-world experiences, but how it relates to other classes. When we're talking about something legally related in our homeland classes, you know, I might not know the answer, but I'm like, I should know this answer, and that I find a way to connect everything. Everything ends up being connected, especially in a program like this.
And even if you can't make the connection, then, you know, you just ask a fellow student.
Right.
And get their perspective. Because, you know, sometimes, like you said, there are things that legal studies know that conservation has no clue.
Yeah.
But conservation might know a thing or two about a bit of their legal side that you may not have studied yet. So, you know, it's very in-depth.
Yeah.
Right.
Or
it's not just study, it's a conversation. You know, you're talking with them, you know, you're going on these field trips that are related, and the Distinguished Speaker Series. That the amount of guest speakers that we are able to get related to, you know, we've had lawyers, we've had, you know, private sector, you know, investigators, which I think, do you know anything about that? You know, maybe more of the private sector side of legal studies?
No, not really. I mean, no.
At least you're honest. I mean,
well, you know, I mean, off the top of my head, I can, you know, there are private investigators, private attorneys, you know.
Well,
sometimes, you know, you work for a business and then you just handle everything legal for that business.
Well, I can tell you like the general idea of, you know, so you do have sole practitioner attorneys who work alone, but attorneys in general are supposed to just work with their clients and get them. I mean, that's how most attorneys are. Most attorneys just work for a firm, whether it's a small, medium, or even a large-sized firm, where they have to work with other attorneys on all different kinds of cases, not just family law, not just, you know, criminal law. You have to explore everything. That's the point of being an attorney, is to kind of know everything. But that doesn't mean there aren't people who work for large companies as, you know, in-house counsel, and, you know, I mean, that's also an option, and it's one I haven't even considered yet, to be honest, but it is a great option. And then, like I said, there are, like, big law attorneys who work for huge firms, and then there are sole practitioners out there who just work for themselves, and obviously you can't take on as many clients, but that's what works for some people.
Do you have any specialty classes for that? So, for example, in the Homeland Security program, they had just introduced a private sector course. So do you take classes that are, you know, maybe not 100% legal, 100%, legal studies, but more of where you can go with it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. We don't really, all of our classes are basically just focused like on the legal studies, because anything outside of that, we can talk about with our professor and understand the opportunity. Because the thing is, like, we're already prepared to become paralegals or legal assistants after we're done with our associates anyway. And so while we're getting those, we're learning of all the options and opportunities to go out there and do that kind of work. But then we're also presented with this idea to go to law school. So our classes aren't we don't have any classes that are necessarily catered to helping that, but we have a professor who is able to help us get to where exactly we want to be regardless. And so,
and I think that once again just helps point out the advantage of the 2-for-2 program.
yeah.
You do your 2 years of, it's just focused on what you want to do, and then you go to the 2-for-2, and then you go to the Homeland program, and then it opens up everything, because it's none of the they're all related to Homeland Security, obviously, but they're not like related sometimes to each other. It's terrorism and crisis. I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of that, but crisis is mainly natural disaster, power outages, and
yeah. I think the main thing with legal studies is if you're going to law school, you get there, you take the same classes that everybody else does, and then you have all of these options. If you want to be a sole practitioner, it's not strongly advised to immediately do that, you can do that, or you can, work at a large law firm, or you can work as in-house counsel. So the point is to gain all the information and then decide, rather than to sit back and decide, because the main point, I think, is for everybody to get to law school, learn all the information, become attorneys, and then decide. And you can always change. You don't have to stay at big law, or you don't have to stay a sole practitioner, I think, is another good thing. There's so many options.
One class, I don't know if you've had it yet, but I think you might be interested in, is Homeland Security Law. Have you had that class?
I'm not. I'm probably going to take it next year, but I am excited for it, because it's like my 2 main programs are finally
they're finally coming together.
Yeah.
I remember you learn how treaties affects laws, right?
Yeah.
I believe it's been a bit since I took the class, and I'm not a legal studies major, so for me it was more of a filler class, but
you didn't enjoy it?
It was all right. It was just,
not your cup of tea.
I prefer more field work.
Yeah.
Not paperwork. That's just me.
See, I don't mind the paperwork.
That's why I liked law enforcement. That's why I chose the law enforcement.
Yeah.
Not like the legal studies or anything. Is because I prefer being out in the field rather than sitting behind a desk.
But do you feel like the stuff you've learned, whether it's legal studies or just academically, like lecture-based material, do you feel like it has benefited you? Do you feel accomplished?
You learn, one thing I remember in the class was, I don't remember the code for it, but it was, if America signs a treaty with a foreign state or nation or whatever, that treaty will dictate if we need to make a law based on it. It's because we signed that treaty, we have to honor our word. So whatever law or delegation or whatever we got to take place has to follow this.
Yeah, well, that's essentially like what all of legal studies is. Whatever precedent you have, whatever has been set in stone before, you are supposed to follow that. That is the way of the law. And so, yeah, I mean, that's essentially what it all is.
And you also have to keep in mind, what's, like we said earlier, what's been thrown out. Like one example is you don't see it much anymore, but there was a time where everybody was trying to argue about the Articles of Confederation, which, for those of you at home that don't know, the Articles of Confederation were kind of a loose agreement between the original 13 colonies of the United States, which we don't follow anymore, because once we became a country, they got replaced with the United States Constitution. So while, yes, we did have the Articles of Confederation, they're irrelevant nowadays. But there was a time, you might see this a lot in legal studies or hear about this, but have you heard of sovereign citizens?
Yes, yeah.
People who, they love to throw around, was it Article 4? I believe it's Article 4, where they say every free inhabitant is free to travel wherever they want. Yeah. But if you read the Articles of Confederation, Article 4 simply just states, free inhabitant is because they believed in freedom, right? So they say free inhabitant.
Right.
And if you read it, it really just says that, if you translate it to modern English, you won't treat anybody from a different state differently because they're not from your state.
Well, sovereign citizens are interesting in general because they like to throw out like laws that we have and constitutions and all kinds of legal related things that have to do with this country, but then they don't want to follow like the other half. And so they think they have a right to some things, but then the other things they just totally can dismiss, and that blows my mind.
I wonder, have you seen them in your legal studies classes, or is this more pre-habit?
This is more what I've learned from Homeland.
Oh yeah, I remember watching a video and we were seeing a lady goes, "He is not an American citizen, but he has the rights of an American citizen."
Yeah, that just
Makes total
confuses
sense.
me.
So maybe that was more of the law enforcement side of the sovereignty. But see, that's where the paths conflict a little bit. It's they merge a little bit, but it's really when you get into the second half of the 2-for-2 program. All right, well, we're running short on time, so Allie, any final thoughts, comments? Anything you want the viewers to just know about the program, even if it's not related to legal studies?
I just feel like it is important to know that, like, although this is what I chose and I think it is a great opportunity, it might not seem like the option for everybody. It's not, but I think, I was totally closed-minded to the idea of studying anything as academically extensive as what I study now, and I think a lot of people are. I wanted to study something fun when I came here. I wanted to graduate with a degree in something that I knew was going to, like, just be happy-go-lucky all the time, and then I changed my mind, and it turns out that this program and, like, what I am choosing to do is actually way more invigorating and fun for me than I ever thought it was. And so I feel like people should know, not just relating to like the legal studies program or the Homeland program, but stuff that might seem too extensive or too difficult to do. I mean, it's not. And that's the only reason I am where I am now. I didn't think that I was ever going to come back to school after I graduated. In fact, I thought I was a lost cause because I did terrible at IU. And then I came back here and everything worked out fine. And so I just feel like it's important for people to know that there's still opportunities, still options. And whatever you want to do, like, as long as you focus and put your feet on the ground and really go for it, I think most things are possible. I feel like that's important to know. And I just feel like people should know all the options within our different programs and all the different options in general.
All right. Well, thank you, Allie. Maybe we can have you on for future episodes and we can talk about more, or maybe even, talk about legal studies with, another legal studies student, get their perspective on the program. Well, thank you again, and we will see you all in the next episode.
Thank you, Anthony.